Welcome to Confessions of a Cyberpsychologist. Today I am chatting with Rachel Wood about AI and the future of work and society. Rachel is a speaker, researcher, writer, educator, and therapist. She's also a PhD candidate researching the intersection of psychology, AI, and the future of work, education, and relationships. Welcome, Rachel. I'm so delighted to have you on board.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's great to be here.
Rachel, before we get chatting about the work you do and your PhD research, can you tell me a little bit more about what you do, who you are, and what the pivot point was for you that sent you down the road of cyberpsychology?
Yeah. Thanks for having me here. I think my pivot point was more of, if I'll start with that, my pivot point was more of stepping stones. I don't have really one particular thing, but as I look back, I feel that, building upon building upon building, each step brought me to where I am today. And so I have a bachelor's degree in music education. I have a master's degree in counseling and I'm a licensed counselor. And then I knew that I wanted to go on and do doctorate work. And when I came across cyberpsychology, which I wasn't aware of until somewhat recently before I started my program, just researching the intersection of psychology and technology felt like the perfect fit for me. As soon as I heard it, I said, that's the one. That's what I'm doing.
So that's wonderful when you find your little thing.
Yes, it is.
So you said you're in counseling and you do psychotherapy in private practice. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you specialize in and what your therapeutic focus is?
Right. So I have a private practice in which I see individuals, I work with couples, and I also do some corporate therapy. And I've had organizations bring me in for pivotal junctures in which will work one-on-one with staff. I'll also supply psychoeducation. This is some of my favorite work. I love working in the workplace and working with vocation. So overall, being a therapist for me has informed my lens for my research. I really see, the work and societal shifts that we're undergoing with emerging technologies through that relational lens.
And you're currently doing a PhD in psychology and technology, looking specifically at AI. Where are you in your PhD journey?
Right. So my studies in my dissertation I have three different studies, original, qualitative, and quantitative work that I'm going through. So I've completed the first one, and I am about three-quarters of the way through my second study, and then I'll do a third one. So I am maybe a little over halfway through that whole dissertation process, by research. So yeah.
What exactly are you studying within your PhD?
So I am studying the impact of artificial intelligence in the workplace and in education through a psychological lens, how it's impacting professionals, how it's impacting overall systems, the education system as well. Yeah.
We're hearing a lot in the media about the impact of AI in the workplace and how it may displace jobs and kind of negative aspects of AI. But we kind of talked about it being almost synonymous in the future with things like Windows or email, because currently we use a lot of Windows programs and email, and it has been a process of adopting it. So what skill sets do you think we need to future-proof ourselves for the workplace, especially when it comes to AI?
Yeah. It's such a good question and really the crux of a lot of my research, Carolyn. And let me frame it by saying that I kind of conceptualize AI in terms of here, near, and far. So we have the AI that's here, we have a rapid evolution to what's near, and then we have far away AI, which we don't even know what that is going to look like. So the way in the research, the term that I'm using for what we need is psychosocial and vocational plasticity. So we need dispositions, an adaptive disposition, in order to carry us through the evolution, the rapid evolution of AI. So essentially what it means underneath kind of our adaptive dispositions, our skills and mindsets. And those are things like cognitive flexibility, curiosity, and grit. Those are kind of three of the major things that are going to help us through this process. And let me start with cognitive flexibility and unpack that one a little bit. So cognitive flexibility, Carolyn, is slightly kind of linked and tied in with ambivalence. So ambivalence is, we all know, it's opposing cognitive or emotional orientations towards something. So what that means with AI is we may feel interested in how AI can help our workflow. We may feel intrigued by it. On the other hand, we may feel hesitant or even threatened that it may shift our vocational identity or take over some of our tasks. So we're really working with these opposing feelings and thoughts toward it. Now, what the research is showing is this can be a barrier to adoption of AI if we don't address it. So the problem lies not in having opposing mixed feelings toward AI. The problem lies in not talking about it. So organizations and teams need to be, instead of kind of saying, yeah, AI, it's the best, and let's get on board, to essentially be saying, you probably feel hesitation and you probably feel interest. Let's talk about all of that. And when there is dialogue and conversation around the AI ambivalence, it actually is a catalyst for adoption.
So in terms of going forward then, because there are a lot of people who are worried about AI and especially generative AI, and we need to kind of build those skill sets in order to embrace that future selves and future technology and the future of work. What can we do to prepare ourselves to develop the skill sets that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'll give two things here. The first that I love, I'm a proponent of as an exercise to practice our cognitive flexibility, is next time you are in a disagreement with someone, I want you to argue the other side better than they can. So this may be with a person, this may be with a group of people, or, it can be any manner of things. But if you can argue the other side better than they can, this is excellent for our cognitive flexibility. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It's not about that. It's about articulating it in a way so that your brain can really hold the space for both things. The second one, another practice is how do we approach AI ambivalence in general? And there are two kind of strategies that we can employ. The first is reactive strategies. These are going to keep us stuck. These are avoidance and domination. So if we avoid thinking about it or talking about, our ambivalence toward AI, that's going to keep us stuck. And then domination. Domination is when we say, okay, I have these two conflicting feelings. I'm excited about AI and I'm hesitant. And you let one dominate over the other completely, either way. And then you really lose the information that's on the other side. And it's important to have all the information on the table instead of just one dominating thought. So those are our reactive strategies. Let's talk about proactive strategies, because this is what we want to do. Proactive strategies are compromise and holism. So compromise, we all know this strategy really well. This is when we say, okay, this, I kind of give and take, and, I feel kind of negative about AI, but also positive, and I'm going to give and take. That's one that we mostly land on. Holism is a bit of a step above that and is a really beautiful way to approach ambivalence, which is saying both of these things are true and I'm not going to diminish one of them. I'm going to accept that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So those are kind of some ways to develop our cognitive flexibility, which is really important in the rapidly changing and advancing environment that we're in right now.
That's really interesting, Rachel. But one of the things that I was wondering is that do you think with our current way or the way that AI has generated our news feeds and our YouTube feeds that we kind of talk about an echo chamber of once you click on one thing, you kind of get the same news feed and the same topics and the same things that you like. Do you think that with the AI that has gone down this path is actually making us less cognitively flexible than we would otherwise have been?
Right. I do think that it reinforces our current views, which removes our ability to argue the other side. And could you imagine if you had an algorithm where every time you clicked on something, it showed you the opposite? It like maybe you clicked because you love cats and then it showed, people who don't like cats. That's a silly example, but imagine if it only showed you the opposite, how much that would help train us to see a different side. And again, not agree with the other side, but see it and articulate it in order to develop, as you said, that cognitive flexibility that's so vital.
I remember when I was at school, we used to do debating sessions within English classes. And then we had a debating team at school, which I once or twice engaged in. Do you think that's a similar type of skill set around cognitive flexibility of being able to engage with the other person's viewpoints and then kind of try and find a way to counterbalance that and win them over?
Absolutely. It absolutely is. Often it's easy for us to articulate our own point of view and difficult for us to articulate the other point of view. So if I'm with someone and I can articulate their side better than they can, and I'll ask them, is that everything that you feel? Is there anything that I'm missing? Can I say it even better? And if I can get to the point where they say, you've explained it thoroughly, that is more of the place we want to live in, is being able to see all the sides with, knowing that our agreement and our opinion can lie wherever we want it to.
Isn't that a good active listening skill anyway, to be able to reflect back to someone what they've spoken about, and also then engages you with them from a perspective of them liking you a lot more if they feel heard and listened to and seen.
Absolutely, Carolyn. You are spot on with that. I mean, these are major components of relationship that, really bond and connect us. And I would say, active listening, summarizing, reflecting what another person has said is beautiful in a relationship and very useful. And this is really a step beyond that. It's saying, no, I'm gonna argue your side better than you can. I want to really get good at it. So you're right on with how important that is in relational dynamics.
So it's kind of, it could be a step-by-step process of if I can't actually argue their side, maybe the first part of that is just reflecting back to someone and trying to understand what they're saying rather than trying to, and then go on to arguing better than them, their point of view.
I love your idea of breaking it up into steps, Carolyn. That's a perfect way to approach it, because oftentimes if someone's saying something we don't like, we kind of shut it down in our ears and we think about what we're going to say next. Oh, this is how I am going to, defend my side, or how I'm going to portray, where I'm coming from. And so if we can let that relax and we can lean back to listen, then yes, step by step, we hear them. Even if you have to begin with kind of parroting back what they said. I heard you say this.
Yeah.
Then, and I think it means this. And maybe you're feeling this, it seems, and then you can kind of inch by inch get to a place of true understanding and cognitive flexibility.
And that is a real skill set that has to be developed. It's not something you automatically have. And some people, I guess, find it easier than others to do that, but it's still something that needs to develop over time. And
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And there is work being done to create generative AI models that interact with us on a personal level. From a community perspective, what kind of impact do you think this will have on future generations and their ability to engage with other and relate to other humans?
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic for me overall. So we are seeing a rise in artificial companions. And for example, there's one specific company that has an app called Replica. Replica, if you've heard of it, has at this moment about 2 million users. So there's a lot of people who are engaging. And Replica is touted as artificial companion that's always there for you, can even be a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That's kind of the realm of this. And really, it's always on, always agreeable. Okay, so when we say that, it really brings up some concerns and considerations for me. So anytime we're in relationship with one of these chatbots, it's inherently unidirectional. So it is me with this computer program that is mimicking and kind of displaying itself as a human, but it's just a computer program, right? So it's not bringing anything to the table in terms of the way that right now, Carolyn, you're bringing who you are, your agency, your depth and, breadth of knowledge you're bringing to the table, I'm bringing to the table. So we have kind of a equal relationship right now that we're working with. But when you are in relationship with a chatbot, it's unidirectional because this chatbot isn't bringing an inherent agency. So what this could mean for the future is as these chatbots proliferate, particularly with younger generations, is an erosion of our bi-directional relational skills. By that, I mean, when we get used to having an interaction with someone, a chatbot computer program, that is always on, always agreeable, well, we're losing some fundamental relational skills such as compromise, negotiation, sacrifice, tolerance, patience, other-centeredness, all these things that are inherent in a bi-directional relationship go away when we're used to having this unidirectional interaction. Even, other things I think of like finding fruit out of friction, in relationships with two people, there's going to be friction, and that's not a bad thing. That's something we can learn from. But all of these things get stripped away when you are in a relationship. Again, I'll use that in quotes, with a chatbot. So with the rise of this generative AI chatbot artificial companions, we really could see the atrophying of these bidirectional skills, particularly with the younger generation.
I heard once someone say that you only really start maturing in life when you get married or kind of go into long-term relationships. And you mature even more when you start having children, because suddenly you're no longer in the selfish relationship in the world. It's no longer just about you. And I wonder if there's that unidirectional relationship, if it stops or inhibits the ability to build that more mature perspective on life, because it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, is not being able to engage with someone else and resolve relationships and resolve conflicts and try and work out life and expand our way of seeing. That actually a unidirectional relationship might make us a lot more narcissistic in some ways, but also immature in others, and not able to cope with the world and cope with trauma or tough times or whatever that life really.
You are absolutely right with that, Carolyn. That's exactly the way that I'm seeing some of this, and looking at how it may unfold in the future. When we kind of rub shoulders with other people, we are going to be challenged in great or small ways. And this challenge is what develops us. It develops us emotionally and cognitively, in all these different realms. It develops our wisdom, our intuition, our communication capacity. All these different things get developed in the midst of the challenge. And if we are incubating ourselves in an environment that is lacking challenge, then we will, as you say, remain in immaturity in certain ways.
Because I'm guessing that there are some real benefits to that kind of technology, but there are the extreme cases which we're kind of touching on in terms of the consequences of that's the only relationship we have is unidirectional. And obviously, it's going to be a both and with the real world, but that's kind of more extreme.
Oh, and I completely agree because I'm not against any of these, I mean, all of us who are using, Claude and ChatGPT and Bard and Perplexity, all of these are, these kind of unidirectional, exchanges that are going on, and I use those. And so it's not that I'm against it, it's that I'm foreseeing, particularly in the younger generation, if we don't beef up our bi-directional relational skills, we don't need to get rid of these. They do serve a purpose. And, research is showing they're even being used to help, isolated populations or vulnerable populations or, practicing social skill sets. So there's a usage for all of this technology. And at the same time, we need to be truly building up, again, these skills that will serve us for our real world relationships and help us mature and really get our focus off of just ourselves. And that's what happens when you're in relationship with others.
Absolutely. And this is really why cyber psychology is so amazing, because kind of understanding what those extremes could be and then setting into place all the other elements of, well, this is what we should be doing going forward. And this is how we can make it really work for us as an individual and society without looking at it, the media narratives around how terrible it is. So
Yeah. And I know we both love cyber psychology, so we're both sitting here as massive proponents, but that's what I love about it too, is it's not saying, well, all of this is bad and we need to kind of, just remove technology. That's not, forward progress. Like, we appreciate the innovation and we want to make sure that we are using it in wise ways, that we are continuing to develop ourselves in wise ways, and look at the whole picture.
absolutely. There's been a recent paper called Future You, a conversation with an AI generated future self. And there seems to be a really interesting therapeutic consequence to this type of innovation. How do you think having a conversation with an AI version of your future self could help reduce anxiety and negative emotions?
Right. So this is interesting. I think the lead researcher of this is out of MIT. And the idea of, AI generated image of your future self that you can sit down with. And part of the goal of the study was to create continuity, future continuity. And they realized through it that it was reducing anxiety in the participants. And what I love about this is the hope that it can bring for people who truly cannot find a future purpose or a meaning or even a vision. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, if I were looking at my future generated self right now, it would be a bit awe-inspiring. It would be really fascinating to see, look at all I went through to get to whatever age I'm at. And so I really like the application of this. I think it could have wonderful implications for people who are really dealing with anxiety and depression and kind of that lack of hope, and trying to find purpose and meaning, just even the vision of seeing yourself in the future. That can be pretty remarkable experience. So I find this study fascinating.
That's really interesting. But in a book that Chris Fullwood, who was one of the guests a few episodes ago, he recommended a book called Stranger in the Mirror. And in that book, he was talking about how the current self really struggles to change any addictive patterns that we have because we can't relate to our future self and we can't see the future self and we can't kind of engage with that future self. So we only really engage with our current self. So I'm just really fascinated at how this AI generated future self may actually help us to get over our addictions or lack of ability to stop eating chocolates or drinking wine or whatever it is that we're trying to get over, because we often so struggle to get rid of those bad habits. And I wonder if that's one way to do it. And I'd be really fascinated to see if that is an option for this AI generated future self and conversations with that future
It's
self.
a great application there, Carolyn. I agree with you. You know, what comes to mind for me is when you think about pro athletes or Olympians, they spend a lot of time in visualization, and they get really good at visualizing whatever it is they're wanting. So it's scoring a goal, or it's running a certain, amount, or whatever it is, they can already see it. They have rehearsed it in their mind again and again. And psychologists, sports performance psychologists aid in this process for them. So I'm thinking, if that visualization is so key for success and for different achievements, this is a way that we're doing that more tangibly. So you could, maybe have a future self that's decades down the road, but what about the future self that just, got over a hurdle of maybe public speaking or asking your boss for something, or, kind of these smaller things that actually are really big? How could we support people in seeing and visualizing what it would be like for them to be on the other side of that? So just kind of brainstorming some really neat applications of that.
Yeah, that's the great thing about all these tools, is that there's so many really interesting applications that actually could revolutionize mental wellness and really help therapists. And you
Yeah.
coming from a therapeutic background, which I'm really loving the conversation from that. But one of the things in terms of therapeutic tools that we often use is, especially when childhood issues are having an impact on current adult well-being, is self-parenting the younger self. And how do you think having something like an AI generated tool that doesn't necessarily look at our future self, but looks at our younger self and kind of self-parents this younger self, what do you think the implications could be for that?
Yeah, this is great, Carolyn. I love exploring all the different things here with you. So, what comes to mind for me is drawing on the theoretical orientation of Gestalt therapy. So, Gestalt psychology and therapy has a lot of elements, but one of their main exercises that can be quite cathartic and powerful is called the empty chair. So the empty chair is when you are in a therapeutic situation and you literally take an empty chair and put it in the middle of the room. And let's say you were working on a relational issue with someone. It could be an inner or interpersonal relationship. So it could be you or it could be someone else. So you put that person mentally in the chair and you talk to them as if they're there. A lot of usages of this is people who are perhaps working through needing to forgive or let go, really let go of something that has happened to them. So they put a person in the chair and they maybe share everything with them. This happened and this, and then you did this, and I don't want to stay a victim to it. And so therefore, I'm going to release and let go. That can be an application. There are applications of doing it with yourself, putting yourself in that chair at a different age. And maybe you're wanting to either give wisdom to your younger self, or even saying, maybe something traumatic happened and you just want to be present with your younger self to say, I see you, I'm here for you in the midst of what you're going through. So there are so many different things that you can do. Also with grief and loss, a lot of times you can put the person in the chair who maybe died suddenly, or a relationship that you lost, maybe a divorce or a breakup. You can, and maybe you're not, you can't speak to this person if they've died. So you put them in the chair and you say what you would have wanted to say. It can be very cathartic in supported environments to go through this exercise. all that to say, doing this AI generated past self would be a fascinating way to really materialize the empty chair, to put yourself in there and look at yourself from a younger age and have an interaction. Just thinking of what would I say? What would I say if I was sitting in the chair right now, looking at my younger self? And I think, we can carry in general a lot of guilt or shame or regret. And those things are not inconsequential to our health and to our well-being and our outlook and hope for the future. So getting a place to say that, get it off your chest. I mean, it can sound like it wouldn't be a big deal, but if you've been through an experience like this, it truly can be extremely, you know, cathartic and healing to move forward. So that's kind of where I, see that heading potentially.
Part of talking therapy is that you put voice to the thoughts in your head, because our thoughts are just ruminating stuff. And to be able to put that into logical, sequential conversation is part of the grounding of that stuff. And that's why talking therapy can often be so good if you, and especially around childhood stuff, being able to talk it through. And I know that as women, we like to talk a lot. And part of that is a kind of talking through issues helps us to understand them. We Whereas if we're just thinking about them, they just become jumbled and it just becomes obsessive and exacerbates the problem. Whereas actually if we talk about it or talk it through, it almost seems to diffuse the issue and all the negative or big emotions that go with it. So I suspect that that's part of what could really help, is just it almost feels as though it's a very confidential environment to be able to talk to your younger self, or to be able to talk to that younger self within a context of, this is the family you grew up in, there's the stuff that happened to you, and to be able to work that out in a way that's a lot more confidential, giving you the agency and kind of the power in the relationship. Whereas it's in a therapeutic environment, it could be quite tough to talk about that stuff.
Absolutely, Carolyn. I love this. And really, what you said earlier at the beginning of that is this idea of when we go through very stressful or traumatic situations, our memory of that story and that experience becomes fragmented. That's part of the outcome of trauma. So it's all just in these pieces, and we can't find a cohesive narrative to what it is and what we went through. And you're right. So when we begin to say that out loud or begin to write down, that it really helps us feel more in control instead of so overwhelmed by it in all of these fragments. So I could imagine if you were sitting again in this technology with your past self, that it's another more concrete step beyond just talk therapy, beyond just articulating what you went through. It's truly being able to give a storyline and a sequential narrative to the experience, which is really important for feeling like you're getting some control back.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is vital for mental health and well-being, really.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a lot happening really around AI, and there's, as you spoke about the future of AI. Do you have any thoughts on what the overall future impact of AI could be, and more specifically, generative AI rather than just AI as a general topic?
I think that part of the impact that is going to be happening here, near, and far is our vocational identities are going to be challenged. And I don't mean that negatively. I think that this is opportunity for us to redesign our vocational identity to really hone in on what we feel like is meaningful for us to do upon the earth. What feels, gives us purpose, gives us joy in terms of what we create and contribute to community and to work. So I do think that we're going to need to do some reassessing, reevaluating, look at our vocational identities. That feels like a big impact that could really, be here and coming down the road.
There is a surprisingly low number of people who are actively engaged in their work. And I think it's about 10 to 12% of UK population. I think it's about 25 or 30% in the US. So that's really exciting for me to hear that actually it might be that we can now choose the work we want to do rather than just be stuck in repetitive work, that we're just doing work for the sake of the weekend or earning enough money to go on holiday. That sounds really positive.
It does. And doesn't it feel like, how are we going to create and design this future? Like you and I could sit here right now and say, yeah, well, it's all going to be awful. And, all of our vocational identities are going to change. But really to sit here and say, yeah, and what could that mean? How could we make that into something that's beautiful, not just for us, but for our kids and our kids' kids? And, that there's an excitement to that.
Yeah. And for me, also, it's about productivity, is that actually we can do a lot more with a lot less time and then open up more time to do the things that we really want to do or do something else. So it's not about just adding work to our workload, it's about reducing the stuff so that we can get on and do other things.
Yes, I agree because our vocational identities, part of what's baked into that is how much do we want to be working? And, we don't always get the choice of that, but what we're saying is that might be coming where we can give ourselves a little bit more time to have our identities, in family and friends and in giving and charitable contribution, all these different things that we enjoy as well.
So, Rachel, what is the most important question I haven't asked you yet?
You have not asked me to hear my best attempt at a British accent.
Go on then.
This, this has been brilliant time of spending time talking to you in our podcast.
Well done. I think you do a better British accent than I do. And the final question, Rachel, is always ask my guests what their favorite cyber psychology related book that they often recommend to others. And it can be, doesn't have to be a book, but it could be some research or a researcher. But what is the thing that you normally recommend to others to read to find out more about what you do?
Right. So I am so steeped in research right now, Carolyn, that I can't wait to have more time to read books. I'm reading all these, research journal articles right now. And really what I'm loving is reading research on ambivalence. I think that that's just such a huge part for us in how we are going to approach AI ambivalence and do it well in order to adopt and remove barriers to adoption. So I would say I don't have a particular research article, but that's kind of what I'm steeped in right now.
Joys of a PhD.
Yes.
Lots of articles, which is really fascinating. But yeah, not much time for reading books. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me on Confessions of a Cyber Psychologist. It's been so fabulous to chat to you, and I hope we get to catch up again in the future when you finish your PhD and you can come and tell us all about your findings.
Oh, thank you so much. Great to be with you, Carolyn.